It is.
Yeah. And different people have done it different ways before he got there. See that, you know, that's but I'm beginning to
6 years ago, when I did it for the League of Women Voters, who had their conference in Ventura, your new hometown. Excuse me. And it was well received, but then I decided then I was asked to do it again in Ventura for the Ventura County Museum, and so I localized it a little bit more, and now I've localized it to Hueneme, so we're going to see what happens. Okay, so first of all, I have a little question for you. Take a look at the poster that's up here. Anybody like it? Is there anybody in the audience that thinks it's a pretty good poster? You don't want to say anything because, of course, I'll call on you after that. Okay, this poster was the most popular poster that came out 106 years ago to celebrate the idea of women getting the right to vote. Now, since you didn't like it, what didn't you like about it?
The flames?
They're flames? No, that's her cape.
Oh, it looked to me like you're burning a witch.
It looks like you're burning a witch, okay? Negative connotation. All right, anything else? Any other things? This is not a very voluptuous woman, is it? No, there's no sex selling here. And who is going to be the person who gets to vote for this? There was no women that were going to be voting for it. So, interesting that this would become the most popular poster. Okay, next thing. This is two-handed operation. All right, I think I got it right. Oh, I got it next. All right, we were the 6th star. And actually, Alice Paul was one of the people who started a flag. And it came with everybody ratifying each of the states. So basically, we're the 6 stars. Now, the 3 little words that women in 1911 wanted to hear were not "I love you." It was votes for women. So they were interested in having that happen. Okay. Did I went too far? This happens when you get excited like I did. All right. This is the information I had when I gave the speech in Ventura County. And I had to, actually, I had this information when I gave the speech to the League of Women Voters. They had their big celebration of this event in Ventura County, which is one of the 8 counties that did not vote for votes for women. They did not come out ahead. And I wanted to bring to your attention 2 counties, Alameda County and San Francisco County, because those 2, in the 1896 campaign, which is the one that came before that, where it was defeated, mightily defeated, they voted 3-1 against. Now, what would you think about Alameda County and San Francisco County? What would it be that would make them so against having women have the right to vote? Can you think of any reasons? All right. The reason was because that's where all the liquor industry had a lot of saloons. And if women got the right to vote, they believed, they would vote for prohibition. And by God, they did. So they were right to be worried about that. Okay. In Ventura County, then, I didn't have this new information, which I just got this just a month ago. Keep going. Okay. This is a precinct list. So we're going to get to know exactly how Ventura County voted. And as you can see, this came from the Santa Paula Courier. The Santa Paula Courier was very favorable to it. And as you can look, Santa Paula sort of voted for it. There was 2 votes against and 1 vote for it. So it's just about even with them. But the big winner here was the city of Ventura. And the city of Ventura had 3 precincts, and they all went for it, largely because of our own locally grown suffragette, whose name was Adelaide Binns Comstock. And I'll talk a little bit more about her a little later. But she was both involved in the 1896 campaign as well as the 1911 campaign. I thought it was interesting that Nordhoff, you know what Nordhoff's name is today? Ojai. Okay, so Ojai was one of the places. Kenyatta would have been in a district somewhere near that. Mound, I could never figure out which one was Mound. Rincon and Santa Clara, but those are the ones who basically voted for it. Hueneme did not. Hueneme, as you can see here, was 19 to 27. Now, I would have thought that Hueneme would vote for it because of the Bards. And I see that Travers is here, and so he can correct me if I'm wrong. But a couple of things that I knew about Thomas Bard. One, he was very, very interested in making sure that his daughters and his wife had their own money. That largely came from the fact that when he was growing up in Chambersburg, his father died, and the mother was left with his, I think it was 4 kids to support, so she had to do a boarding house. She had to open a boarding house, and things were really tight for a long time. So we know that that was the reason he thought the women should have their own money, and he was very right about that. He also had a daughter, Beryl, okay? If you'll notice, Barrelwood Enterprises, that's the clock, and Barrelwood was the name of his estate over there on the base. So Beryl was very special. Why was Beryl so special? Travers, do you know? She got to have the grand tour of Europe, all the kinds of things that you would do with a male child. But she was the second oldest. The oldest person was a son who died within the first year. So she was really the eldest child. But isn't that great? She got the first car. She got all kinds of really cool things. So I would have thought that. Plus also, well, I'll talk a little bit later about the Women's Improvement Club, which was part of the whole business. Okay, next. Come on. Oh. So why was the vote important? Well, okay. You don't have a voice in political affairs. You're not going to be there to make any laws and do the important things that have to do with your own future and the future of your children. Now, I'm going to pick out 14 or 15 women that I'm going to tell you a little bit about, give you a little sketch about. And the woman that I want to tell you about here is Ellen Clark Sargent. Ellen Clark Sargent came from San Francisco. She was married to a U.S. senator. And in 1900, she said, I'm not paying my property taxes. No taxation without representation. Well, we've heard that before, right? Apparently it didn't apply to women, because when she went to court, they said, no, sorry, you go to jail or you pay your taxes. So that led or pushed Ellen Clark Sargent into becoming a suffragette at both the state level and the national level. She, however, died in 1911, just months before the vote was passed. So I'm sorry about that, but she didn't get to see it. Still, we're very grateful for her husband, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Okay. Second reason the vote was important was because it was the way you could participate in society. 2 things women didn't get to do. They didn't get to pick whatever occupation they wanted, and largely they were shut out because of education. A lot of women were not allowed to particularly choose a college or university. Now, here's my next woman of the year, and Clara Shortridge Fultz. Have you ever heard of the Fultz Criminal Courts Building? It's in Los Angeles. It's right downtown. It was named after her. Clara decided to sue the dean of the Hastings Law School because he wouldn't let her in, and she won. This is before she was even a lawyer. Clara is my woman of firsts. Oh, that's my grandson. Okay, she was the first female admitted to the California bar. She was the first female lawyer on the West Coast. She was the first clerk for the state judiciary. She was the first female appointed to the State Board of Corrections, and that was a very important thing to her. Children going to jail, prisons, and things like that. She was the first licensed notary public. I guess that was an all-boys club. The first female named a director of a major bank. And finally, the first female to run for the governor of California, which she did in 1930 at the tender age of 81. Remarkable woman, was not married. All right, next. The third reason it was important was because of equality under the law. All right? Women were not allowed to have property rights. You married, you had a bunch of property, it automatically went to your husband. He had total control over it. Secondly, a lot of women stayed in very, very bad marriages because the custody of the children was threatened. So they could not leave because they wouldn't get custody. Had to do with, again, the money that was being made. And third, they weren't allowed to serve on juries. So they weren't getting a fair shake then, half the population, if they were arrested and went to trial, or if their children were arrested and went to trial. They were tried as adults. So that wasn't the way you wanted to go. Alice Park, and I found the best picture I could of her. Alice Park was what we would call a handsome woman. Okay, but in this one she was really kind of cute. She was tough. She was one of the finest debaters of any male or female in those days. And Alice Park, she traveled the state and had this, most people described her voice as very scratchy. Well, in those days they didn't have this thing called a microphone. They just had to talk and you lost your voice and that's what happened to her. Now, she also had some very interesting beliefs or ideologies. She was a socialist. She was a vegetarian. She was a pacifist. In fact, she was so much a pacifist, she founded the Women's and International League for Peace and Freedom. But what we remember her best for is she was the one who actually wrote the law in 1913, 2 years after it passes. She writes the law granting women equal rights of guardianship. That was a big issue for her. Okay.
Was she married?
Alice? No. The Supreme Court, it went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not believe women were included in the phrase. You're going to do it for me? Thank you, sweetie. Oh, that's going to be on the tape. Okay. Okay, the U.S. Supreme Court took the phrase "all men are created equally" literally, which meant that women were not included. And it was basically white men too. All right, so that was, next slide please.
Oh, sorry.
That's back. That's back.
Doctored pie. Thank you, and you can keep going. So the protection under the Constitution didn't include women, and you can go to the next one. Okay, so not to put too fine a point on it, women's rights were invariably decided by men, and it wasn't fair. I just saw a meme on Facebook that had all these dogs around the table, and we're here to decide on cats' rights. Much the same idea. Next slide, please. Okay. This is one of the most interesting people too, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Elizabeth Cady Stanton says, hey, look at the seal of California. California, of course, was the goddess that the state is named after. Well, we got a goddess on the seal, but we don't have any goddesses in the state. And they're not getting the respect that they deserve. Elizabeth Cady Stanton would have died in 1902, so she didn't get to see this particular campaign. But she started out as an abolitionist. And many of the old timers in the movement started out with abolition, and then they might move to temperance, which was very important to them. And then she became women's rights, totally focusing on that. She was what is known as a radical suffragist. Okay, Susan B. Anthony, and there's a couple of others, who believed that the vote should come to women before it went to black men. That's what made it radical. So she was president of the National Women's Suffrage Association and did much fine work, but was not around for this. Next slide. Oh. Need to go back. Okay. Remember I talked about Ellen Clark Sargent? Ellen Clark Sargent's husband was this wonderful man named Aaron Sargent. He was from California. He was a Republican. He started out in Congress and then he ended up in the Senate. He and Susan B. Anthony drafted the 19th Amendment in what year? Oh, I guess we can't see it. In 1878. So the timeline in California goes all the way back to that. Now, 1893 is really important because of the Columbian Exposition. Anybody read the book White City and the Devil in the White City? Yeah, wonderful. John and I actually went back to Chicago to look at where all the buildings were and things like that. So there's still a lot of stuff at the University of Chicago that came about as a part of that particular exposition. But what was unique about it, and why I mention it here, is because at that exposition, they decided they were going to have a women's building. The first time recognizing women and the contributions women actually made. And we had a state board of lady managers, one from each state except for California. Because they didn't think so. And in Ventura County, they said to the women, not only are you not going to participate in the women's building, but in our state building, the only thing we want you to send is jams and jellies. Okay, so, and this is why we have in California a woman named Harriet Strong, who earned 2 patents for her plans for the damming of the Colorado River and the reservoirs that would result from that. 2 patents she did for that, plus irrigation systems and a whole bunch of other stuff. Wonderful, interesting woman, but California had to do dams and jellies. So, in 1893, we actually had a vote for women pass in the state legislature, both the assembly and in the Senate. But we had this guy here, Leland Stanford. He vetoed it. But guess what? His wife gets her revenge. All right. Next one. Okay, so, the first time, I remember I told you about the 1896, it was called Amendment 6. This was going to be a really neat thing for women, so says the governor. Oh yeah, we're going to help you out, ladies, and you're going to have this wonderful thing happen, and it's going to be great. Well, it lost. It lost really huge, 13,000 votes, largely in the big cities. It was, and as I said before, 3-1 in Alameda. The opposition was not only the liquor industry, but it was also the Democratic Party. And it didn't hurt that there was a depression or recession or depression going on at the time. So a lot of money wasn't available to be spent on this. Now, Sarah Severance, who is one of my favorites, you'll like her too. Sarah Severance says, okay, we're doing an analysis. What happened? What defeated us? Greed. Of course, she was talking about the corrupt Republicans in terms of the Congress, in terms of the Assembly and the Senate. Greed, liquor, lust, and ignorance. California ought to teach women better than to put our faith in politicians. And that was the last time we ever did. Our work should be with the voters, and this was a fabulous idea. Making a few unbelievers her special mission. So you reach out to 2 or 3 other people, that's all it's going to take. And that was very good and sound advice, because basically what was ignored during that campaign was all the Southern California and all the little cities, all the little communities. So Sarah Severance is a woman who lived in San Jose. She was a teacher and she was a big WCTU person, okay, which means that was temperance. And she was a fabulous writer. She wrote a lot of pamphlets and she wrote a hilarious play that I'll tell you about later. So first thing she did is she goes to Sacramento and she has this idea for suffrage just for women, only in educational issues. So in other words, women could vote only on anything that has to do with education. And that actually passed the Senate, but then it lost in the House. So yeah, it didn't work out for her. But she was she also ran for superintendent of instruction in 1890. And of course she lost, but still, this is our gal. Next slide, please. This comes to 1910. So this is a year before the campaign, it starts. And we have some progressive Republicans in the California, in power in Sacramento. And we finally get on the ballot. It's Proposition 4. But how many propositions were there? 23. Typical, right? Okay, so we have to, the women had to figure out a way to stand out. How could they stand out from all these other ones? They had only 9 months to campaign, and so that became the target. Rural areas and small cities, and just one-on-one, having women talk to their neighbors, people that they knew. Next, please. So, women did not like to be called politicians, or even what they were doing was political. So they called it civic altruism. And there were, as you notice here, there are a whole bunch of reasons that they got involved. Not just, one thing, not just temperance. Temperance was a big one, and there was certainly a party for that. They also wanted to go after all the corruption in government, but they didn't want to do it negatively, so they said positively, we're looking for good government. We're looking for, so they didn't want to use the word reform, but that was basically the idea. And it was corrupt, up and down the state, everything was. Schools, they were very interested in schools. A lot of times schools weren't getting funded, the money was going into politicians' pockets. There were working women then, thousands and thousands of working women. They weren't necessarily married, but basically they were looking for an 8-hour day. That's the only thing that would be fair. So there were a lot of union appeal here. White slavery. Isn't that an old-fashioned term? It means what? Prostitution. Prostitution. But basically, that was a big problem. Apparently, young ladies were coming out of the farms, going to a big city, and all of a sudden that's what happened to them. And finally, the whole thing with juvenile courts. Let's treat juveniles as what they are. Their brains aren't developed. They shouldn't be held responsible as are adults. Next. Okay, getting back to Hueneme and the Women's Improvement Club. This is the other reason I thought Hueneme would have been much better organized and would actually be voting for it. What had happened? Did you go back? Yeah. No.
This is the next one.
Oh, that's the next one?
Yeah.
All right, forget what I said about Hueneme. I'm going to come back to this one. All right, white middle-class clubs. A lot of women, they had servants, they had time on their hands, they wanted to have some sort of club where they could be doing good things for their community. So we had the white middle-class clubs, we had certainly temperance groups. They were somehow related or not related to the church groups. Then we had women who were at universities or teaching at universities or professionals, whether they were doctors or nurses or journalists. They had those associations, and finally they had the women's unions. And anybody remember any of the women's unions? The big one was, of course, for people who were, seamstresses and women's garment workers union. Okay, now we can go down. That's what I mean. So we've got the Bard family, but not just the Bard family. We have Claire and Molly Gerberding that are members of this Women's Improvement Club. This starts in 1909, I believe. They had enough money in their dues to buy this little book, which we have somewhere in one of the display cases. And they did interesting things. This kind of resulted from the fact that we had a mess here after everybody left to go work at the sugar beet factory, and actual businesses got on wagons and they moved over to Oxnard. So we had a lot of abandoned properties, a lot of abandoned animals. Things were just getting a mess, so they decided they actually cleaned things up. They would go down, fix fences, prune trees, things like that. But they also thought the most important thing was a library. They really wanted to have a library. So that was going to be, and if you can look at the picture there, there's 2 doors on the Women's Improvement Club. One was to the library, which is half the house, and the other was to the meeting rooms. I had the pleasure of finding the deed, or a copy of the, not the, actually, but the deed that was given. This was Molly Bard. She bought the property on Scott Street, then she paid for this house to be built just for this organization. And the women were pretty smart because they charged men rent to rent these rooms. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty important. And then they did other things as well. They gave, dancing lessons to the teenagers, and there was a number of different things. Then they later, Red Cross became important, and this went on for years and years and years. Next is fundraising. The mother's milk of politics, correct, is money. So remember I told you about the revenge? Jane Stanford gave a bundle to this movement. That was her husband that had to really screw things up. Phoebe Hearst, which was the mother of William Randolph Hearst, gave a chunk of money. And Miranda Lux, you may not have heard of, but she was a real estate moguless. Moguless, is that right? So she had a bunch of property there. And there were all kinds of other women as well who did that. But you know how women are. They decide how are they gonna get money? Well, they sell cakes, or they do, they think about those kinds of things. And of course we did have that. We had all these different clubs, and the women charged dues for the clubs. I think I found out that the dues in the very beginning for our Women's Improvement Club were something like $5 a month, which would have been pretty healthy for that time. Okay, so, and then they sold stuff. Pennants, posters, you'll see some of the posters. Postcards, playing cards, and shopping bags. Very smart of them. But one of the things that was a big seller was this. This is not the actual picture, but if you made a $2 pledge, and it was a pledge because working girls, not meaning that kind of working girls, but girls that work for as a job, they could get this picture of Susan B. Anthony and Anna Howard Shaw, and they could pay it off week by week, a few cents from their stuff. So all these different ways were ways that they tried to get money, and they apparently got enough money to finance this. So next. Button, who's got the button? I didn't know anything about this until Julia took me over to the Reagan Library, and we saw the Madeleine Albright collection of her brooches and things like that. So here's the button that was the most popular one. I think we've got someone here, but it's usually a gold button with a black thing on it. They got distributed 90,000 of them just in Southern California. That's quite a few. But if you were perhaps a bard, or someone who isn't going to be overtly a suffragette, you wore the pin on the right, in which the jewels, the gemstones, told the story. The G, with the green stones here, stood for give, the white pearls for women, and the purple amethyst for vote. Give women the vote. So it was a secret message that they wore in this very expensive brooch. Okay, next one. They employed technology. Okay, today, a lot of the women's marches and stuff were arranged on what? How did they do that? How did they get women to come out and march in LA and Washington and all that stuff?
Facebook.
Social media, primarily Facebook. So they didn't have that in those days. But what they did have was the telephone. Now I looked that up because I thought there couldn't be that many telephones at that time. Hey, there were. There were actually a lot of telephones, and mostly used by women. So women were the ones who would use the telephones to talk to each other. Now, a lot of them were isolated on farms, or they were isolated with home of kids or something like that. So they had enough phones up and down the state to communicate with each other very quickly. Secondly, they didn't have television or anything, but they had the Magic Lantern show. And so you could take this, it didn't need to have electricity, they could use a candle. And they could take it wherever they wanted to, and they would show the slides, and it would be a reason for people to come in and listen to them. This is one of the ones I actually found a slide that said, if politics is in baby's food, why shouldn't mother be in politics? And lastly, and this is something I was discussing with David? Yes, and with David, there's a car, and that's not the car, I'm sorry. I wish I had a picture of the car. The car was called a Blue Liner, and leave it to the college girls, okay? They got some guy to come and drive up and down the state in all the little towns with this fabulous car. And so all the men would pour down, come out and wanted to see what this car looked like, and that's when they stood on the running board and gave a little pitch for voting for women. Okay. All right. Next. I have to give credit to a number of different women, and I'm not going to give a long credit line for them, but Lillian Harris Coffin, she came from San Francisco. She has the distinction of being the first and only suffragette march leader in 1908. There was a lot more marches after that, but that was the first one. She was, of course, wealthy, came from San Francisco. But what she started that was very interesting and very progressive was she had a New Era League. It was called the New Era League in San Francisco. They did a lot of political stuff, but guess what? Who they invited? They invited men to be their speakers, and then they invited men on the board. This is going to be the new era. Maud Younger. She's got to have a place in your heart. Another wealthy woman who decides that she wants to help with unions, especially for waitresses. She becomes known as the millionaire waitress. So she goes down and works with these women and gets them into the unions. But she was also a character, also never married either. She liked to show how she didn't need a man in her life. And so when it came time to do the floats, when they had to do the Labor Day parade, she was the one who drove the team of 6 black horses. And she also got a car and did the first cross-country auto trip. So this, you don't want to mess with Maud. She had a way about her. She was also a phenomenal debater. Could wipe up the floor with any man. Okay, next. This is our gal. This is our Adelaide Benz Comstock. And Adelaide was born in England in 1830. She and her family moved to Iowa. Who knows why? And that's where she met this guy, Andrew Jackson Comstock. And you know what Andrew Jackson was noted for? Well, he was every bit as fiery tempered as his namesake? No, whatever. Okay, so Andrew Jackson was kind of a nasty guy. But he keeps her pregnant and barefoot, pretty much all the time. They moved to California and they moved into the Avenue area in Ventura. Do you have to get that?
No.
Okay. Anyway, they have 6 children, but they only have 5 before he goes to the Civil War. Now, he fought in the war with Mexico and he was just a private, but this one, he's a captain. He's a big deal. But he comes back wounded. A musket ball to the pelvis. Not a good place. So basically what happened to him, he became even more ornery and nasty, and she really wanted to get out of there. But she couldn't because her youngest, she had 6 children, and especially the one that was just born. So basically she waited till her daughter Ella Mae, and she became Ella Mae Sheridan, she became 13 years old, and that's when she divorced him. And you can imagine how scandalous that was in Ventura County to get a divorce. Let me just tell you about Clara and Dr. Cephas Bard. They didn't get along. I don't know, I'm not a shrink, but it sounded like that she had some sort of mental illness. But now, Cephas Bard, who's Thomas Bard's brother, married the sister of Thomas Bard's wife, Molly. So Clara and Molly are sisters. And he decides he can't take it anymore, Cephas does, and he divorces her. He is not, according to what I read, not allowed to even ever cross the threshold at Barrelwood again because of the divorce. So it was a pretty scandalous kind of thing to do. Our girl gets very involved in the 1896 election, organizes, and then she did a great job in 1911 because all 3 precincts came in overwhelmingly that way for those for women. She was a good friend, personal friend of Susan B. Anthony. I believe Susan B. Anthony came out here to see, I don't know if she went all the way to Ventura, but she did show up in Southern California. But we do know that Julia Ward Howe, does anybody remember who she is? The Battle Hymn of the Republic, she wrote the words to. She came out here a number of times and visited Adelaide. So that's our woman. Okay, next. We know about Folks, we heard all about her. But the other one that was very instrumental was Carolyn Severance, no relation to Sarah Severance. And she is one of the people that really developed Los Angeles. And she started out as an abolitionist with her husband, and then came to Los Angeles, started something called the Los Angeles Women's Club, and that morphed into something called the Friday Morning Club. That was the one that had a lending library, it had an employment bureau, they conducted classes, there was a real outreach. And she and her husband had a lot to do with the social, the way the social life was organized in Los Angeles. But the thing she's known for is founding the first Unitarian Church. The first Unitarian Church in Los Angeles in 1877. And Joanne knows about her, right? Yeah, okay. Next. Statewide, we have, of course, Ellen Clark Sargent, you remember her, no taxation without representation. And we have Elizabeth Lowe Watson. Here's another one who, I don't know that she actually divorced her husband, she certainly kicked him out, he was an alcoholic, and she ended up starting an apricot farm. And that's how she made her money. She lived up in Cupertino, but she also started a lending library. That always appeals to me, a lending library in her home. Now, she went a different way in terms of religion. She was a spiritualist, a spiritualism. Anybody know anything about spiritualism? It was sweeping the country. I think spiritualism credits President Abraham Lincoln as being one of the believers. Harriet Beecher Stowe was another one of the believers. But it was a lot more shysters than honest people involved with this. And they did seances, and they preyed kind of on people that were missing their loved ones so much that they wanted to have communication with them, and so there was a lot of fraud that was involved in that. But there are spiritualist churches today. I believe there's one in Santa Barbara, and it's just people who have gone there told me it's like a regular church. It's nothing crazy. So that's what we know about that. All right, next one. Behind the scenes, we have this woman whose name is Rose French. Apparently, she was responsible for about 3 million pages of running them off. They didn't have, those kind of sheets. She had a print shop that she took care of. They also wrote a lot of these pamphlets in different languages so that they could take it. Oh, okay. The languages were English, Spanish, Italian, German, and Yiddish. Isn't that great? Maud Younger was one of the big pamphleteers, and hers. Can you go? I didn't skip it, did I? No.
One more.
Oh. I think one more.
One more.
Yay! Okay, she wrote, Maud Younger, remember the one that likes to drive the horses and all that kind of stuff? She wrote about this, and this is one of the few places I've actually could see how many people were working. Today in America alone, we find 7 million women working. That's a lot of women. And they're working at jobs that are not very well-paying jobs. So I don't know if this has been improved that much, equal pay for equal work, but here you go. Okay, now you can go to the next one. Support by the class, question mark? No, not so much. Because newspapers were owned and the publishers were men. I read a number of articles about from the Oxnard Courier editorials that were against the vote. David pointed out that there was a couple of them for that. Santa Paula ran stuff that was for it. Los Angeles Times definitely against it. San Francisco Call was definitely against it. So a lot of the major newspapers were not going to give women any kind of credit or any kind of way to reach people. So we had two, and there was certainly more. Emily Pitt Stevens was a wealthy woman who bought a newspaper, renamed it The Patriot, and started putting out her stuff, and it was all over the state. Charlotta Spears Bass, the California Eagle, which was already an African-American newspaper. But the thing that was really instrumental was the Pacific Coast Women's Press Association. We had a lot of women who had jobs at newspapers, whether they didn't really write editorials mostly, but they wrote articles and features and different things like that. They were editors. Any chance they got, they put the message in. So there was ways you could get around being in that. And I'm sure that would make somebody a really good dissertation. Next. Posters and billboards. These are just a few that kind of give a little bit. David has brought in a whole bunch of different things, cards and stuff that he's going to share with us later. But the posters are online mostly, and some of them I recreated. Justice to California Women, vote yes, give your girl the same chance as a boy. That's one of the arguments. Or his latest purchase, things like that. This one, the one in the middle, is interesting because it doesn't have all the states that I've already passed. It leaves out Washington, so it's Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, and Washington, and I have no idea why that is. But I bet you it makes that poster worth more money if you're a collector. Next is postcards, and I chose one of each. This one was a little girl. I guess it doesn't sound as preachy when a little girl tells you what you should do as a man. But this was an anti-women's vote one where she's in the act of voting, and all of a sudden she realizes she has a cake in the oven. Like, that's going to happen. So that was that. Now, next one has to do with songs. Songs were pretty crappy. They were not really good songs. But I had one interesting incident I wanted to relate to you. While in Los Angeles, there were dozens and dozens of women on the street corner, and here come the cops. And the cops were going to arrest them. They said, "Where's your permit?" And they started singing, because you could sing, but you couldn't gather to do anything else. So they were singing these songs, and here's the song right here. Western women voted. Reuben, Reuben, homes no longer, bounded by our flat's four walls, factory, prison, pure food, playgrounds, women hear 100 calls. What's interesting about this is that represented a lot of the different women's roles. Some of them were working in factories. There was women in prison. And the pure food had to do with children. We had a sort of a Pure Food Act of 1902, but it wasn't very good. And two things happened. One, there was a lot of contaminated canned food that was out there that wasn't being properly inspected, but mostly it was those patent medicines. Patent medicines all had 80% alcohol. So even if you had a dry, it was a dry city, that's where a lot of people got it. So that wasn't too good. All right, next, here's our debaters. Gosh, they were good too. I've heard some recordings, but these women used rational arguments. They used reason. They used logic. They used evidence. They were mostly all attorneys to start with. And the men's arguments, as you're going to see later, were very emotional. It was like a role reversal. In other words, they're always talking about women they're being too emotional to actually be able to vote, when it was the men who were much more emotional. Okay, so I've talked about all those women already. Next, social events. Any chance they could do something, they would have a woman or a man get up and speak about suffrage. Now, so I just listed what that was. This picture is particularly interesting because it's the national leadership coming to California. So those names, as you can see, are Carrie Chapman Catt. Selena Solomons is my favorite, and I'll get to her in a minute. Selena she's my hero. She's a real political scientist in a day when they didn't have women political scientists. But you can see who all the different people are, and they're all meeting at Selena's home up in San Francisco.
Is Lucy related to Susan B. Anthony?
I don't think that they are, I don't know that she had any kids. But I don't know who she was, but she may have been a ward or something. I don't really know the history of that. But I thought of that too. That's a good question. Didn't bother to research it, sorry. Okay, next. Parades and marches, big things. There's our friend Lillian Harris Coffin, who's standing to the left. Maud in her famous car, and that's one of the Labor Day floats that they would have. So Labor Day was a very big thing for parades. Next. Here's Selena. Selena was creative. She was smart, analytical. She actually wrote the book where I got a lot of the research from. And as you can see, it says How We Won the Vote in California. A couple of years later, she actually did an analysis. Some of it's kind of chatty, and it's got everybody's name in it that you could ever think of, because she wanted to give credit to every single person who worked on the campaign. But she was the one who had a great idea. San Francisco working women, let's give them a cheap lunch, a 5-cent lunch. We'll set up a lunchroom, and we'll just talk about stuff as the conversation goes. And we also have a lending library in the back with pamphlets if you're interested. So they got a lot of mileage through that. Selena grew up in San Francisco. She was a Sephardic Jew. And she was the one who sat down and figured out from the 1896 campaign what went wrong. So the people that she held responsible were the liquor industry, and so they needed to do something that helped with that. This particular lunchroom was on Union Square in San Francisco, so a lot of people were there. But her book is still, and it's available online. You can get that book online now. It's a part of that Google projects, you know. So if you're interested, it's worth reading. David. Okay, next. The satirical plays, and they were hilarious. They're also online. Selena wrote one called The Girl from Colorado, or Anti-Suffrage, and it's basically arguments about how anti-suffrage should think about the women having the vote. But the one that's really hilarious was Sarah Severson's one. She has the legislature in California is all women. And they're debating whether men should have the vote. It's good. It was really good. Okay, next. Lots of door-to-door. Remember the idea from Sarah that you have to go and have friends? They would go door-to-door, but guess who they'd see? Nothing but women. Yeah, so that wasn't so good. So the next thing they would do is they went to the churches and the lodges and the men's clubs. Hard to do. That was very courageous for them. They would go 2 or 3 together, and they would give their speeches. Sometimes they would be heckled, sometimes they wouldn't. So what was the anti-suffrage side like? What was that? And basically we have the liquor industry. They spent a fortune to fight this. They had a letter writing campaign in which they wrote every single person that owned a saloon all through California and told them what horrible things were going to happen when women got the right to vote. And here's the 2 campaigns, which is going to be more appealing to men. Help keep you pure, please vote against the sale of liquors, or the place that they call Cheers. That kind of thing. So that was a tough one for a lot of people. Drinking was a lot more widespread, and alcoholism and so forth. It was people didn't know as much as they did about what caused alcoholism. But women were they saw what happened. The guy would not come home with a check. He'd spend it all at the bar, and a lot of horrible things were happening to families because of drinking. So the anti-suffrage side was also, hey, we don't want women to have a vote anyway. And in Southern California, the major place where that happened was the Los Angeles Committee of 50. These were the 50 most wealthy men in Los Angeles, and they had tons of money. But what they did was very interesting. They did a whisper campaign. So you never knew what they were talking about. They were basically going to men, rich men. They would meet with rich men because it was part of what they did. And they would tell them what would happen if women got the right to vote, and they would go to poor men or working men to tell them the same kind of thing. So they could it was just like you and I just had a little chat over at a bar. And that got a lot. You saw that Los Angeles County went the right way. However, it was really tough. The Los Angeles Times was one of the papers that came out against it, and I think I mentioned that before. Okay, next. These 2 are kind of the saints of the movement. It's basically Carrie Chapman Catt and Anna Howard Shaw. Let me tell you a little bit about them. Carrie Chapman Catt was the president of the National League for Women's Suffrage. But what we really have to thank her for is she started in 1920, the year after women, at the same time that women got the vote all over the country, the League of Women Voters, which is the nonpartisan way to give information to people. She also wrote a tremendous book called Women's Suffrage and Politics, the Inner Story of the Suffragette Movement, which was written in 1923, just a couple of years after what happened. Anna Howard Shaw is really Dr. Anna Howard Shaw, and she started out as a school teacher when she was 15 years old. Then went to Boston University School of Theology, became the second woman to graduate from that school. Then she was ordained the first female Methodist minister. Then she went out and got a degree in medicine from Boston University. Her record was overall 10,000 lectures on suffrage. 10,000 all around the world. Okay, now, next. He's the bad guy. He's the man that everybody loved to hate, including Susan B. Anthony, who said she was looking forward to the day when people like him would be extinct. Unfortunately, that hasn't occurred yet. All right, they're both basically arguments against suffrage that has to do with calling names, name calling, okay? A suffragette is a woman who wants to raise hell, but not children. And then you can see what he wrote here. Let the manly men and the womanly women defeat this amendment and keep woman where she belongs in order that she may retain the respect of mankind. Horse feathers, right? Okay, what he did do that was a delaying tactic was he said, hey, I want to pass a law in California that only women can vote for this amendment. Only women can vote. He thought that it would go down 10 to 1. It never passed. He never got enough votes to get it passed. But there was a big problem with women. There was a lot of women who did not believe that women should get the vote. All right, next one. This is a cartoon from Life magazine in 1909. A woman behind the man, a woman next to the man, and now she wants to be in front. The next cartoon is also from Life magazine. Yeah, if you read the Bible, you know about the temptation, the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, and how Satan comes and tries to, the whole idea of power. Kind of tells you what men were afraid of, doesn't it? Okay. Next were the ad hominem attacks, which I think is hilarious because it means against men. that was what they were against women. Then there was all this name calling again. Suffragettes drag the skirts of their sisters through the dirty political pool. They have no homes themselves. They want to destroy others. And they want to knock women off their God-given pedestals. There's only two choices here. Either you are in your home or you're on a street corner. Yeah. The next one is about women are unqualified. Of course they're going to find a woman who's going to say women are unqualified, but guess what? They had to go all the way to New York to find one. And this cartoon is very good because it talks about, the big fear if a woman's on a jury, they're going to make everybody not guilty because of the emotional things. Yeah, it's not true. Okay, next. Unintended consequences. And this is usually a good argument for any proposition that's on the ballot. You never know what's going to happen. Well, I guess that there's two big fears here. One is that if you get the vote, then you're going to have to run for office, which Sarah says, no, if you don't want to run, you don't have to. But this is the one I love. If women became voters, they'd have to give their true ages. Like we're all going to lie about how old we are. Okay, next. The seesaw argument. And this is one where you have, if you're going to lift somebody up, you have to push somebody else down. Not necessarily true, is it? You can lift a lot of people up at the same time. So this is the idea that men are going to be running, doing up diapers and doing all this kind of stuff, and women are going to be out, God knows what they're talking about. And everybody would become the opposite, feminized men and masculinized women. And I think there's some people today that still believe that. So I guess that's a pretty interesting argument. Next one is, okay, we have a lot of irresponsible voters now, so you're just going to double it. Oh, okay. And that's when they brought up the whole discussion of should we have some sort of qualifications for voting. Property owners, because they know that women don't own a lot, couldn't at that time own property, and all kinds, poll taxes and all kinds of different things. That's not an area you want to get into, but that's basically what men were doing. Next one is just plain stupid arguments. I'm sorry, I can't help. All right, women should influence policy solely through their influence on men. Well, you know what? It happened. I'm going to tell you about the last holdout vote was in Tennessee. It was a guy named Burns, and he got a scathing letter from his mother saying, "You better vote for this." And he was the last one. So yeah, it actually works. Women have better things to do, no time to vote. Well, that's true, but we'll still figure out how to do it. Don't worry, little lady, your husband will always take good care of you. Now I'm going to read this to you, even though I know you can all read. But if this is a Valentine, this would have been sent out by a postcard, it would have been very effective, I think. If you would only marry me, you can have all women's rights, such as staying up on evenings when I'm out late at nights. And should such things not satisfy the longings of your soul, you can wash up all the dishes and carry on the coal. And as a really model husband, I feel like I'm bound to shine. So say that you will take me to be your Valentine. I like that one. Okay, next. The big surprise. And it's a big surprise because when the newspapers picked up the news on the day of October 10th, 1911, they thought they lost. It took 2 days for all the ballots to come in. And just in San Francisco alone, they found 3,000 fraudulent ballots. They had a lot of women looking at those ballot boxes and making sure this happened. So probably would have passed by more than that. But what we have here is we have 3,587 votes, which meant that it was one per precinct. So if every precinct that voted, just one vote made the difference. So I think that's pretty interesting. The Sixth Star is also an extremely good book, if you're looking through that, how this happened. This was written a lot later than the contemporaneous ones. So we became the Sixth Star. You can go to the next one. And this was the first vote. Now, ordinarily I wouldn't show you this because who cares, people voted. Now we know that Adelaide Binns Comstock was the first woman in Ventura County to register to vote. Well, this woman is important because her name is Elizabeth Gerberding. Elizabeth Gerberding was married to Albert. Albert was the brother of Clara and Molly, the Bards. And so there was a suffragette in the family. I tried to find any real evidence of this, and this was true. So she was in fact a reformer. She was part of the gang of, I forget what they called it, something the gang of something, which they went after San Francisco and they tried to reform it. I think it was the League of Justice. She was the only woman on the League of Justice. Okay. The father-in-law of her, and the father of Clara and Albert and Otto, who's down here, his name is Christian Otto Gerberding. Christian Otto Gerberding was the editor and publisher of a paper called the Daily Evening Bulletin. And so when Otto came here, Barr gave him enough money to start the newspaper, which was the Hueneme Herald. So he was doing that. Okay, the next one. I have to tell you about her, even though it's Oregon. Okay, Oregon tried really hard. Look how many times they put this up for a ballot. And it finally get passed in 1912, so it becomes the Seventh Star. And Laura Stockton Starcher is a very interesting woman. She lived in a place called Umatilla, Oregon. Now, her husband was the mayor, and her best friends were all the city council members' wives, and they were ticked off because all the money in Umatilla was going into their husbands' pockets instead of taking care of the schools and the roads and all the things they needed to do. They have the vote now, but they don't have enough votes as women to outvote the men. So, but these guys are so cocky and they think they're gonna win. They don't bother to vote. A lot of them don't bother to vote. So they wait till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, see who's not gonna vote. They're all in the bar, and so they go and vote, and they all get elected. So we have the petticoat government in Umatilla. They do a lot of reforming, and it gets to be a nice town again. See what happens when you get the vote? Okay, next. Critical mass. Why was California important? Well, it was only 1/6 of the way. We were the 6 stars, 6 out of 36. But we had so many people here. And we also, people looked at it, in a lot of the states like Oregon, Kansas, and Arizona, then the next year they decided to do it. And we have then at this point 6.5 million women who are able to vote in the United States. And that's 45 electoral votes. So that could make a big difference. The next one, please. And Harry Chapman Catt, we talked about her before, she started the National American Women's Suffrage Association, NASA, which was different than the one that Alice Paul would start later. And they only differed on their approach. One of them wanted to go state by state, the other one wanted to go as a national movement. But Alice Paul was then part of this organization. She slid away, and then next, she creates the National Women's Party. And the National Women's Party really grows, has 50,000 members, and she raises a lot of money. I put it in today's dollars, the $17.5 million that she actually gets. That is what happens. Finally, we have enough movement to go, and you see next. California ratifies. We have a progressive governor, William Stevens. He calls a special session of the legislature on November 1st, 1919. California ratifies. But still, we have to have 36 states. Next is the end. And then we finally get the Susan B. Anthony, is what it's called. The 19th Amendment passes all the states that need to ratify, August 18th, 1920. Now, what's so interesting is that these words, just a couple of dozen words, those words were written in 1878. They never, ever changed. It was a collaboration between Aaron Sargent and Susan B. Anthony. And it passes, and now we have the right to vote. And hopefully we're all going to do that. All right, that's the end. Any questions? Comments?
Good.
Oh, you're welcome. David, you want to say something?
No, I'll just pass this around, let everybody take a peek at it.
He's got some those are collector's items. So when he walked in with his votes for women pin, I couldn't believe it.
Thank you, Beverly.
Oh, you're welcome.
Here you go.
Oh!
A little bit of hooch.
Hey, I can use that.
Oh, thank you. That was very well. And I'd like to welcome Arlene Frazier, who was on the Oxnard Harbor District and was probably one of the best harbor commissioners they ever had.
That's right.
Helen Brandt, who was one of the founders of the Hueneme Historical Museum. And I'd like to welcome Donna Breeze and Councilwoman Sylvia Nunez-Schnapps, Professor, and Travers Bard Newton. And I'd also like to welcome Councilman John Sharkey, who's out there with his aide-de-camp Ellen. And I'd like to thank all of you, and what we do now is traditionally we pass the hat because we don't get any money from anybody except certain people. And I'd also like to ask Travers to come up here. He was going to do something. We've worked a collaboration between the Lighthouse, which is the Port Hueneme Lighthouse,